Obviously, countless people have died here for various reasons. Hangings, a murder-suicide, beatings, accidental overdose, electroshock therapy, and etc. There are 4 floors, with the 4th floor being the well-known hotspot for paranormal activity. Being security, I have to check it out every once in a while. The 4th floor is essentially an extremely long hallway, approximately 1,800 steps, with housing units on both sides throughout. Each unit has a 5-inch, thick steel door, and there's a window at the very end of the hallway. They don't house patients due to the fact that the county took over a while before I started, and it's completely empty by the time 3rd shift rolls around. The 4th floor is the only floor in the entire complex that is completely off-ground, due to the complex being built into a hill. It is also where the electroshock therapy took place a long time ago. This occurrence happened last week, Wednesday, on the 3rd shift. I wanted to do a walkthrough on the 4th floor that night, around 3 a.m. There was no reason, aside from I was just feeling brave. I walked all the way down the 4th floor to the window. Eventually, as I got closer, I started seeing that the window obviously needed cleaning. When I got about 5 feet away, all of a sudden, there was a handprint that would have been extremely noticeable, even from 15 feet away. I looked at the handprint, turned around, said nope, and walked back down the hall. On my way back from the window, I peeked into the side office area with my flashlight just to look. There was nothing, and I kept going. After a couple of seconds, it sounded like somebody was running up behind me, so I walked even faster because everything in my body said not to turn around. As I kept walking, I passed by a unit, and as I passed by it, I heard what sounded like someone punching the door. I put it up to paranoia due to the running I heard prior. That was until I passed by another unit. Another loud thud, as if someone punched the door. So at that point, I started speed walking down the hall, and all while I heard footsteps following mine. Mind you, these units are not connected at all, and the entire floor is entirely empty. That's just one of my experiences. I have also been having dreams of a white, skinny woman in a hospital gown that has black hair with bangs in her face. I always thought she was just a reoccurring person in my dreams, until I talked to one of the CNAs that worked tonight in the kids unit. I never brought her up to the CNA. We were just talking about ghosts, and she said that numerous people have said that they've seen the exact woman I just explained. I explained to the CNA in detail about how she looked in my dreams, and she just went pale with her mouth hung open. Supposedly, this ghost is extremely well known throughout the hospital by various people. People have seen her in mirrors, and have been locked in bathrooms and have just seen her walking around. But in my dreams, she always just appears and runs up to me, grabs me, and screams in my face. There was this one dream in particular where I woke up from a dream to wake up in my duplex's stairway. I walk down the stairs because that's where my bedroom is, and walk into my bedroom. Once in my bedroom, I see my bed, my fiancé sleeping on her side of the bed, and myself sleeping. In front of my closet, which is on my side of the bed, I saw the same woman standing there, right next to my body, just staring at me. I walk up to her, and I get the courage to ask her who the hell she is. She looks at me, grabs me, screams in my face, and then shoves me onto my bed, which is when I officially woke up at 3:15 a.m. I have no clue who this woman is at all, but I still dream about her every now and then. Every single dream is in a different place, but she's just there. And this has been going on ever since I started working at my job. I'm from California. My entire family resides in Los Angeles. Unfortunately and fortunately, we moved when I was about 2 to a small town in Texas. So as I like to flex, I'm Cali-made and Texas-raised. Although some of my father's siblings moved with us due to better job opportunities, we still made frequent visits and often spent a majority of our summers on the West Coast. It was always an adventure every time we went down to visit. Some of the most bizarre experiences in my young adult life were from summers down in Cali. There's one memorable memory that stood out to me and my cousins. It's one of our staple memories that we often discuss now as adults and try to figure out. One summer when I was about 11 or 12, me and all of my cousins spent most of the days outside of my grandmother's house. She lived next to an apartment complex in Lawndale, California. Being bored was always the beginning of many great adventures. On this particular afternoon, me and my cousins decided to play Charmed. It was a bunch of us girl cousins that played witches with powers, and our boy cousins would be the demons. It sounds silly, but it was like tag, but in teams, and make-believe powers. As we played, we saw a little girl up above looking at us. She had blonde, short, curly hair and was in a nightgown. She stared at us with an uneasy grin, and what I can only describe as a loud stare. She was standing near a rail on the 3rd floor. I say a loud stare because when I got uncomfortable and broke eye contact, I looked back and all of my cousins were just gazing up at her. It's also important to note that I was the second oldest in the group of 6, and the ages were about 6 to 12 years old. For some reason, it felt wrong, so I yelled out "hey" to get everyone's attention, and they all looked at me. I knew something was wrong because my little cousins didn't speak or react. When we turned around, the girl was on the 2nd floor now, closer to us. Me and my older cousin shared a look of despair. We knew something was off. At the moment, we didn't question how she moved so quickly. We didn't want to scare the kids. She still had the same stare and look on her face. Without breaking her grin, she asked if she can play with us. Me and my older cousin told her no, and we both, for some rude reason, cussed her out. I should also mention, I'm Mexican American, and in our culture, we're taught to curse out the bad spirits. And I think me and my older cousin knew something wasn't human about her. The energy felt heavy, and at this point, my younger cousin seemed frozen in fear. Immediately after we cussed her out, we had a blackout. They were common in LA, and this wasn't the first time we'd experienced a blackout. But what happened next was unexplainable. When we looked back, the young girl was walking on the utility pole's electric wire. We could see her squared over, almost like an owl, and she stared at us and continued to stand up and walk away. We ran inside, and shortly after, the lights came back on. We never saw that little girl again. My grandmother had several friends who lived in that apartment complex, and no one knew who or what apartment she came from. She simply was never seen again. My family is originally from a small fishing village called Catalina in Newfoundland. 4 to 5 miles north of Catalina is the even smaller village of Little Catalina. The surrounding area is covered in small ponds and bogs. In 1913, the town of Catalina held a dance for the local youth. My great-grandmother was about 13 years old at the time and was in attendance at the dance. According to her, a girl from Little Catalina came as well, walking a few miles. Her name had been lost to history. Well, that night, it was unusually dark, and a fog rolled in off of the North Atlantic. The dance finished at about 9 p.m., and everybody went home. My great-grandmother said that the next morning, the girl's parents were riding in their wagon. They were stopping at everybody's houses, looking for their daughter. They were hoping she may have stayed in Catalina with friends or relatives. One boy said that he'd seen her walking up the road towards Little Catalina after the dance. A search party was organized, and for 2 weeks, local men were searching forests and bogs while fishing boats scanned the coastline. But they never found any sign of her. Eventually, everybody came to the grim conclusion that she'd gotten lost in the dark and fallen into a bog hole. And a bog hole is quite like quicksand and will suck you down. Months later, one man claimed to have seen her floating over the bogs one evening. He said that he attempted to get her out, but she disappeared into the forest. I suppose nobody put much weight behind his claims because he was also a drunk. Years later, probably the early 1920s, My great-grandmother said that she was out berry picking in the bog with her sister as the sun began to set. She said she was looking across the bog and saw a girl floating steadily and smoothly over the ground. She said her movement was so smooth, there was no possible way that it was a person walking. Great-grandmother claimed to have seen her a few more times throughout the years, but she passed in 1991. In the summer of 2008, I was 16 years old. My grandfather and I were spending the summer in Little Catalina with relatives. Being old enough to drive, I spent most of my days in Catalina at the swimming hole. One evening, I was driving back with a distant cousin, and as we were passing the bogs, he pointed something out through the windshield. When I looked over, I saw a girl standing in the bog. Except the strange thing was her height. She seemed overly tall for the distance that we were away from her. It was about 40 yards. I would have guessed that she would have been 7 feet tall. But her proportions didn't seem to match that height. I slowed down and I asked my cousin, who's a local, if he knew her. He said no. The girl then turned and smoothly and quickly floated away behind some trees. My cousin and I were genuinely freaked out and drove back home. When I got home, I told my grandfather what I had seen. All he said was, "Huh," and told me the story my great-grandmother had told him. He said over the years he had heard people who had seen ghosts in the bogs, but always thought it was just a story to keep kids from playing out there since it was dangerous.